Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to this important evening in remembrance of the Holocaust and the 6 million. I am Rabbi Mendel Alperowitz of the Chabad Jewish Center in South Dakota, and I would like to begin by thanking our co-hosts this evening, Augustana University, under the leadership of Stephanie Herseth-Sandlin, and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, led by Mark Blackburn. I would like to give special thanks to this evening's major sponsors, the Leona M. and Harry B. Helmsley Charitable Trust and Sanford Health, who together have made this evening possible. Please all join me in giving them a round of applause. Before we begin with our program, I'd like to share a few brief remarks, if I may. When we initially started planning this event several months ago, we made contact with 2 survivors who agreed to come to Sioux Falls to speak for us. Unfortunately, within the last few days, both of them have suffered medical emergencies which prevented them from being here with us this evening. We are therefore extremely grateful to our speaker tonight, Ernie Gross, a survivor of the horrific death camps of Auschwitz and Dachau, who so graciously agreed to travel from Philadelphia to Sioux Falls at such short notice to share with us his experiences. That our plans had to change at last minute just demonstrates the importance of this event and how we all have the timely duty to hear these stories while we still can. My wife and I moved from New York to South Dakota, inspired by the teachings of the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, to promote Jewish education, awareness, and celebration, and act as good ambassadors of Judaism for all mankind. The Rebbe was a visionary leader and made it his life's mission to pick up the Jewish nation from the ashes of the Holocaust and inspire others. As the only rabbi in South Dakota, I'm sometimes invited to speak at the different universities across the state. Earlier this year, as I was speaking before a group of students, when I asked how many had met a survivor, only one raised their hand. I realized then, as I do now, that I have an obligation to do all that I can to share these memories. During the Holocaust, more than 6 million of my fellow Jews were systematically killed in gas chambers, mass shootings, hangings, and so-called medical experiments. Others were left to die of starvation, freezing, typhus, and other deadly diseases. When we look at these atrocities, we often wonder not only how fellow human beings in democratic and educated societies could have done this, but more importantly, why others didn't stop it. When Jewish lawyers and doctors were banned from working at the professions they had been working all their lives, no one said anything. When rabbis were pulled from their synagogues and made to scrub the streets while crowds of people looked on and jeered, no one said anything. And then, almost as a natural course of events, when Jews started being rounded up, stuffed into ghettos, and stripped of their very humanity before being taken to their death in cattle carts, no one said anything. In April this year, the Washington Post reported that 2/3 of American millennials could not identify what Auschwitz was. 22% of millennials in the poll said they hadn't heard of the Holocaust and were not sure if they've heard of it. The 41% of millennials that did know what Auschwitz was and that did have an educational background on the Holocaust believed that only 2 million or fewer Jews were killed in the Holocaust. These statistics are shocking and unfortunate. Tonight, we will hear from a man who was there himself, a courageous hero that survived the unspeakable horrors. In our audience tonight, we have teachers of elementary students, professors of college students, and many university students, as well as several younger students that traveled all the way from Chamberlain to be here tonight. In our audience tonight, we have hundreds of representatives of the Sioux Falls community. Our hope this evening is not to remind and convince our audience that the Holocaust happened. You are here because you understand that. Our goal for this evening is that each of you become inspired to encourage others as well, friends, family, and community, of our responsibility as a human society to ensure that no such genocide can happen again, ever. Unfortunately, today, within living memory of these atrocities, while those who experienced them still walk the face of this earth, we are witnessing both a denial and a shocking rise in anti-Semitism. If history is a good indicator, it tells us that the hate that begins with the Jews never ends with the Jews. It was not Jews alone who suffered under Hitler and Stalin, nor is it Jews alone suffering from the ruthless pursuit of power that today masquerades as religion. Today's radicals who hate Jews and Israel desire to do harm on America and Western civilization, no less. When looking back at history, one has to wonder how it was possible that a country whose citizens prided themselves as being the most educated and sophisticated in the world at the time, Germany, could have committed such evil atrocities, the worst in recorded human history. And if people as educated as the Germans could have done it, what guarantee is there that others won't do something like that again? Which points to the fact that human beings, all of us, cannot rely solely on our own common sense as the factor in the implementation of human decency. Rather, we must follow a higher moral code, a God-given code, that will stand as our moral compass. I refer specifically to what is known as the divinely ordained 7 categories of moral laws and principles, which have been given for all humanity and are the basis of any decent human society. We each have a duty to remember and never forget, to make sure that the events that took place in our living memory can never happen again, not to us and not to anybody. To introduce Ernie Gross, I'll invite Stephen Rosenthal, who together with his wife Carol are prominent Jewish community leaders in South Dakota for over 4 decades and visionary supporters of a strong America and Israel alliance. Before Stephen comes up, please pay a few moments attention to the screen for a short video presentation.
I'm a very tired, old and worn-out man, and my eyes have long been blind. Most things that people say to me just seem to slip my mind. Oh, but the suffering and painful times that were in years long gone are still as clear upon my memory as the numbers on my arm. What will become of all the memories? Are they to scatter with the dust in the breeze? Who will stand before the world knowing what to say when the very last survivor fades away? When I hold my grandson close to me, fingers trace the pattern of my tears. He asks me, Grandpa, tell me, why do you cry? What is it that you fear? And I tell him there once was another child who smelled as sweet and felt this warm, but he was taken from before my eyes, and only I remain to mourn. What will become of all the memories? Are they to scatter with the dust in the breeze? And who will stand before a world that now wishes to deny? Or will they believe in someone who never heard the cries? There is nothing I can say or do to make things change. Time has a way of passing by so fast, and like a fleeting shadow, no one will recall the faces of the past. What will become of all the memories? Are they to scatter with the dust in the breeze? Yet one thought gives me comfort. It's all that I have left. Oh, I know that God in heaven won't forget.
Before I introduce our guest this evening, let me first thank Rabbi Mendel and Mussie Alperowitz and Chabad Jewish Center of South Dakota for organizing and planning this event. I also want to thank each and every one of you for attending this evening. In today's world where many people, including many countries, are denying that the Holocaust, the Shoah, even happened, we must hear this testimony and become advocates of the truth. We know that if we do not recall history, and especially evil, we are doomed to repeat it. Our guest tonight is one of the survivors, while 6 million were innocently slaughtered. Together, both collectively and individually, we must stand up and say, never, never again. Our guest, Ernie Gross, was born in 1929 in Terts, Romania. His father was a salesman, and his mother was a Romanian language tutor. He was one of 9 children. In April 1944, when Ernie was 15 years old, the Hungarian government deported him and his family to the Silush ghetto for 3 weeks, and from there to Auschwitz, where his parents and his younger siblings were murdered. Ernie spent nearly a year at forced labor at Auschwitz and other concentration camps. When he was no longer useful no longer strong enough to work, the Nazis sent him by cattle train to Dachau, where he was to be killed. On April 28, 1945, the train was stopped due to the heavy bombing by American troops. The train arrived at Dachau a day later than planned. On April 29, 1945, the same day that Ernie arrived at Dachau, the American Army liberated the camp. Ernie was standing in line with other prisoners awaiting their death when they saw the Germans guards throw down their arms and flee. Ernie and his fellow prisoners were free. Within his 11-month internment, Ernie lost 5 members of his immediate family and an unknown number of extended family members. Ernie spent the next several months in a displaced persons camp, and in September 1947, he finally immigrated to New York City and from there to Philadelphia, where his father's 3 sisters lived. He studied at Northeast High School in Philadelphia and worked in various jobs to support himself. In 1957, he married his wife, Bella Berger, who also survived concentration camps. Together with Bella, Ernie has 3 sons and 2 grandchildren. Our moderator this evening is Sarah Crosby. Sarah received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater from Stevens College and a Master's in Social Work from Loyola of Chicago Graduate School of Social Work. She has worked as a professional actor in New York City, a psychotherapist, and presently as a social justice and diversity educator. After moving to Sioux Falls with her husband and 3 children in 1999, Sarah co-founded the Dakota Academy of Performing Arts. They are members of Mount Zion congregation. Ernie will first give introductory remarks, followed by a conversation with Sarah.
I'm very excited to be here. As more people I see, as more energy I get. I don't read from notes. I don't have any notes in front of me. Actually, I believe in Judge Judy. He says, if you tell the truth, you don't have to memorize it. You don't have to write it down. As a matter of fact, I watched her today also. In Philadelphia, everybody knows not to call me during Judge Judy. So I really don't know exactly what I'm going to talk to you about, but I have a mental screen in front of me. Whatever I see there, I will relate to you. Sometimes it's going to be sad, sometimes it's going to be more sad, but sometimes it's going to be humor in it. Because when I started to talk, I couldn't get through everything, it was breaking me down. And I decided the only way I could do this if I mix in humor. So I hope, I promised after I was liberated that every day I gotta make 10 people laugh. So I hope I'll be able to accomplish this today here. If some of you have a hard time to understand me because of my accent, that's not my fault. When I came over here, I didn't have it. I got it here. Yeah. I'm going to start up what happened since 1941. We were under the Romanian rules, and I was 12 years old. They didn't like us, but they didn't bother us. Many times when my father was talking to a Romanian, I heard him saying, "We don't like Jewish people, but you we like." And that's how it was. For me, to go to school was not easy because the students didn't like Jewish students. I was the only one in my class. In those days, everybody brought their lunches, and we were eating at the desk, and the teacher left. So for them to make fun of me when I took out my kosher lunch, they took out their ham and the bacon and rubbed it on my lips. I had three older brothers. When I went home from school, I was too ashamed to tell them what happened to me in school, and of course I didn't share it with my parents. Because of that, I was not a happy child, and I remember when I went to synagogue, they used to say, "Here comes the boy who never laughs." And because I was born the fourth child, more like in the middle, anything went wrong, I was in the middle of it. Like I was born in the wrong time, in the wrong place. I'll give you an idea. We had a house, in the middle was a kitchen and 2 bedrooms. In each bedroom was 2 beds, which makes it room for 8 people, but we were 9. So every night, I was the leftover one. I had to go to my mother, "Where am I going to sleep tonight?" She said, "Sleep with your father." Next night, "Sleep with your younger brother." The best I liked when she told me to sleep with my 2 older brothers. Because in the morning, when my mother made the bed and the sheet was wet, she never knew who did it. So I liked that. So no matter what I was doing, nothing was going for me. That's why I grew up, like, even with the clothes, because my father couldn't make enough money to buy seven pair of shoes and 7. So from the 3 older brothers, everything was handed down to me. Because of that, my pants were either too long or too short, and I didn't like everything about myself. In 1942, the Hungarians took over Transylvania, ordered by the Germans, so I was under Hungarian rules. The Hungarians were worse than the Romanians. First, we have to put on a yellow band, and after a while, it was not good enough. We have to wear a yellow star. Normally, till 2:30, we went to public school, and after 2:30, till 6 o'clock, we went to Hebrew school to learn how to read Hebrew. The Hungarians didn't like that. So anybody from 12 years to 21, after school, instead of going to Hebrew, we had to go work for the city, like cleaning up here, cleaning up there. So we no longer went to Hebrew school. My older brother, he was 21. He went into the Hungarian army, but not as a soldier. He just went in there to do the dirty work. And that's how the life was from 1942 till 1944. 1944, April the 15th, happened to be on a Saturday and the last day of Passover. We no longer had any matzah left. So my mother woke me up in the morning to help her bake the bread, so when everybody else gets up, there is bread and cake. And around 5 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on the door. Usually, we don't ask who it is, because those days, nobody was stealing, nobody was robbing. Maybe it was a neighbor. We opened the door, there was 2 Hungarian police. Here what they told us. Within an hour, you have to be in a synagogue. If you have money in your pocket, leave it on the table. If you have jewelry, rings or watches, take it off, put it on the table. If you don't follow the rules, we have ordered to shoot you. When you leave your house, don't lock the door. We went out, we walked to the synagogue, and we saw from all directions Jewish people coming to the synagogue. Once we were there, they locked the doors, locked the windows. because there was no plumbing, no electricity, no water. It was very uncomfortable to be there. If somebody had to go to the men's room or ladies' room, you had to find a corner to do it. So the air was very unhealthy. After 3 days, they opened the door, and we were happy we were going to get fresh air. What we didn't know was a long line of horse and wagon. They told us to go into the horse and wagon, and if somebody jumps off, you're going to be shot right away. I don't know how long it took to get to inside Hungary, but once we were there, we went into empty houses that those Jewish people already went to Auschwitz. We were there for 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, the cattle train came, and we went in a wagon as many people as possible. When it was completely full, they gave us a bucket, they locked the doors, and they told us anybody has to go to the bathroom, has to go in that bucket. I don't know how long it took to get to Auschwitz. All I know, when we arrived there, the doors opened, and they said, anybody who has luggage, you have to leave it in the train. You can't take it with you. Out of the commotion, my mother and father, younger brother, younger sister, very much ahead of me. Luckily, I was still together with 2 brothers. We were standing in this endless long line, and everybody had to face Mengele, and next to him was a huge German shepherd. And he made a decision that day who should live and who should die. Prisoners already worked in Auschwitz. They went into the wagons, took out all the luggage, put it on trucks. One of them sneaked over to me, and he asked me how old I am. I told him I'm 15. He said, when you face Mengele, you better say you're 17. Because if you're 15, you're going to go where your parents went. I said, where did my parents go? He said, because your father hold on to a younger brother, your mother to a younger sister, automatically they go to the left. I said, what happens when you go to the left? He said, you see those 2 buildings? They're going to go into the first building. They're going to tell them to get undressed. They're going to take a shower. Instead of shower, gas came, and they died immediately, and then they go into crematorium. And I have to listen to this message. Then he tells me to look up in the sky. He said, you see the dark smoke? The sun cannot get through it. This is going to be your parents in about a couple hours. After he gave me this information, I cannot explain to you, it just vanished from my brain. And I was busy with myself now. How about if he's not going to believe me? We were getting closer and closer, and then when he looked at my 2 brothers right away, he said, to the right. That means they're going to go to a labor camp. When my turn came, he's not saying anything. He's just scanning me, don't know what to do with me. The German shepherd scared me more than him, because he was standing there waiting for an order, what he has to do. Then finally he says to me in German, wie alt bist du? How old are you? By that time I was already shaking and nervous, and when I said 17, he didn't understand me. Then he asked me again, how old are you? For a reason I cannot explain to you, but my mind told me, you better stand up straight and say it loud. That's exactly what I did, and told me to go to the right. And because I was only a couple of days in Auschwitz, I do not have a number on my hand. I got it later on my prison clothes. What happened next, you're going to find it in a minute. I'm going to sit there. And the young lady, Sarah, is going to ask me a question. And whatever she asks me, I will relate to you.
Did I stop at the right time?
Yeah, you did great.
He told me it has to be working. Could you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I don't need, this is for you.
This is, I have one. I don't think your lapel mic's working. So I'm going to give you this.
Please.
Oh, there.
Do I have to use this? Could you hear me without it? Okay.
Just here, try it without it. See if your
Can you
lapel.
hear me now?
Okay. We'll set it here. How's that?
Okay.
There? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, welcome, and thank you for sharing the first part of your story with us this evening. I want to go back to what you were talking about when you got to Auschwitz. What was, when they opened the cattle cars, what was the first thing that you remember seeing and thinking as you walked out onto the platform with your family?
We were surrounded with soldiers, and they just told us, mach schnell. That means jump off fast from the train and keep on moving. We were so confused, we didn't even know where we were. We did not know we were in Auschwitz. And we didn't know anything. We just followed whatever they told us to do, because they're the ones who had the guns, and we didn't have anything.
Before, I'm going to even back up a little further if I can, because I wanted to ask you, because I think it's really important for the audience to understand. Before, when you were a very young child, there was certainly anti-Semitism in your city or your town, but what was your life like as a young boy before the Hungarians came in, before you were marginalized in your school and made fun of? Was there ever a time when your mom and dad just went to work and came home and made dinner and you were a relatively happy family just living your life?
Yeah. I only had this problem in school, but at home, we didn't feel any anti-Semitism. We had a good life. We were all happy. And this just happened all of a sudden. We didn't even know that in 1938 was a Kristallnacht, because there's no way for us to know all those things. That's why we were very surprised when those two Hungarians came to the door.
So you had just mentioned about the selection process. I don't know if the audience is aware of the selection process that went on when people came into Auschwitz. You went to the left or you went to the right. To the left meant death, to the right meant you would work. So were you aware of what was going on before this person explained to you where your parents and your younger siblings had gone?
No, before this person came over to me, we didn't even know we were in Auschwitz. We didn't even know what's going to happen to us. We were just following rules, whatever they told us to do.
And we had discussed earlier today about the Nazi soldier or officer with the very large German Shepherd, and later you found out that he was who? That he was Dr. Mengele?
Yeah, later on I found out that Dr. Mengele, every time a transport came in, he's the one who made this decision who should live and who should die that day. Even though in the Jewish religion, Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day, there is a sentence, it says that the judgment is going to be in heaven about you, and it's going to be who's going to live and who's going to die. But in Germany, well, Dr. Mengele made the decision who should live and who should die.
You, after you went with your brothers to the right and your life was spared for that time being, what happened after that?
My two brothers, they took right away to the camp. I was still there for another day. And what happened is, there's a field. In the middle, there's a table with electric shavers. Everybody had to get undressed, and we had to shave each other's hair. Over the fence was a women's camp. They had to do the same thing. They also put on the same kind of prison clothes. Once we were dressed, you could not tell the difference between a man and a woman. We all looked alike. So after then, they took me to a city, it's called Kaufering. It's 15 kilometers from Munich, and there was 7 camps. It didn't matter in which camp they're going to put you in, but everybody knew, try to do whatever you can not to wind up in Camp 7, because Camp 7 is the end of the line. Once you're there, you're only there for a couple of days, and you're shipped to Dachau.
Okay, so what was a normal day? I mean, when you arose in the morning, if you even slept at night, what were your days working like?
You left in the dark, the camp, and you came home in the dark. In the beginning, what I had to do, a train arrived with a 50-pound bag of cement, and I had to, there was a prisoner on the platform, put it on your shoulder, and you had to take it to the trucks. And because I was only 15, it was kind of heavy for me, but they were rushing you. They were telling you, walk faster, do it faster. But for some reason, your body is able to take all kind of punishment when it needs to. So I had to do that every day, and sometimes I couldn't walk fast enough, they will beat you. Each soldier had one of those sticks, and it was a pleasure for them. They could do that, to beat you.
You had also talked a little bit about the food and what you were given, how much you ate. Here's your bag.
Once we arrived in the camp, they put you first in Camp 1. You're only there for about 6 weeks. They don't want you to get to know everybody and make an uprising, so they put you in Camp 2. That's how you go from camp to camp. The first thing they gave me is a cup like this from aluminum. They told you, make sure you don't break it, make sure you don't lose it, because this is where you're going to get your food. In the morning, you are standing in line by the kitchen, they give you black coffee, nothing else, a little bit of black coffee. When you come home at night, you're also standing in line there, they give you like 3/4 of soup. If you are lucky, you got a piece of potato. If not, it was just soup. They gave you a loaf of bread like this for 8 people. So we designated a person to make sure each slice is even. For the first week, it really didn't matter. You were not that hungry. But after a week, it was important who get the end, who get the middle. So we took 8 pieces of paper from 1 to 8, the same thing in the bag. Whatever you pick, that's what you're getting. In my group was a father and son. The father got the end, the son got the middle. And I saw with my own eyes, the father said to the son, I need more energy than you. How about you give me your middle, I give you my end. He thought for a minute and he said, no, I'm just as hungry as you are. That was a lesson for me, that if I have something extra, not to share, because if you're going to share it, you're not going to make it. And I tell you what happened. I had to train myself to be like that, because I come from a family who were very generous. And here, I got to be not nice, even if my cousin is there, not to share it. So I had to train my brain like that. What happened is when I was liberated, and I went out for a date, and the girl I was with liked what I ordered, and she said, "You was steak. Can I get a piece of your steak?" My mind told me, if I give her, I'm going to have less, because that's how my brain was working. I had to tell her, I'm very hungry, I can't do that. I have 3 sons. Every week I gave them spending money. But as I gave it to them, my heart told me, I'm going to have less. So I figured, I'm not going to spend my life like that. I have to retrain my brain to be charitable. So the first thing I did, I joined an organization that I have to write a check. When I drove on the boulevard and the light was red, and there are teenagers selling bottle of water, not only did I buy 1 bottle, I bought 2 bottles. Just the idea to help. If somebody was selling flowers in the wintertime, and I could tell it's more than an hour, this guy had a sale, they were half frozen. I bought them anyway. The pleasure I got when I looked at his face, he became lively when I gave him the money. So that's what I was doing. But one day it didn't work like that. I stopped by a red light, and the guy had a sign, "I'm hungry, I'm willing to work for food." But he was on the ground, and he was sunning himself. I said, "Excuse me, how do you expect to make a living? Your son is on the ground." He said, "I'm on my coffee break." So you see, it doesn't matter what you do for a living. You need a coffee break.
Would you mind?
I got 2 more.
Oh, you got 2 more.
2 more items. Don't rush me.
Forgive me, please.
Once you're in camp for about 2 weeks, you find out people who were heavy smokers home, and now you don't have cigarettes, you're addicted, you go out of your mind. You don't feel like talking to anybody, you don't feel like doing anything. So if you were able to find 7 cigarette butts, which was not easy, he was willing to give up his piece of bread. So the way he looked at it, for 7 days he's going to be happy, he's going to smoke. And the way I looked at it, I had an extra piece of bread. When he gave it to me, how do I know who smokes, who doesn't? You didn't have to know. Or you walk like this, in a minute you're surrounded with buyers. When he gave it to me, I make sure none of my friends see that. I put it right away in my pocket because I knew they're going to ask me. So this was very important for me. I'm not done yet.
I won't rush you, I promise.
Now this potato is going to tell the whole story. You see how it's dried out? Because this was already twice in North Carolina. It was already in Jacksonville, Florida. It was already Dickinson College. And he was already in Fort Dix and many other places. So the way this one was drying out, that's exactly what happened to me in the camp. I went in there very healthy, and every day I was getting when it was all over, I only weighed 85 pounds. So why do I show you this potato? Because I had a cousin, his name was Meyer, and he was a very, very well-educated person in Hebrew. He could even be a rabbi. And he was in Barak 10. And one prisoner came over to me, he said, "Your cousin Meyer found a potato. Why don't you go there? He will give you a little piece." But I know that he knows, just like I know, not to share. So I couldn't make up my mind what to do. If I go and he's going to say no, I'm going to feel worse. If I don't go, maybe I should have gone. I figured I decide to go. I go there. I say, "Meyer, I know you found a potato. When you peel it, Just give me the skin. Because even the skin has a little potato on it. You'd be surprised when you're hungry. For me, it would have tasted just as good as for you now, a slice of pizza. When I asked him, he said to me, let me think it over. When he said, let me think it over, my heart was falling out of me because I knew the answer. He said, Ernest, I cannot help you. I'm not going to peel it. I'm not even going to cook it. If I cut you a slice, maybe you're not going to survive. Maybe I'm not going to survive. If I keep it for myself, maybe I survive. Time went on. We both survived. He moved to New York. I moved to Philadelphia. He was 10 years older, got married, had 2 children. I was single, had a good job, had money in the bank. Time went on, telephone rings. Yedemeyer. He's not asking me to lend him $500 because he knows I'm going to say, let me think it over. He said like this, Ernest, I'm exhausted, whom to ask? I asked my 2 sisters, they cannot help me. I asked my brother, he cannot help me. You're the only one. Could you lend me $500? If you don't, in 1 week I'll be evicted and I'll be homeless with a wife and 2 children. Now I have to make up my mind what to do. I still didn't forget what he did to me in the camp. But then I remember that the Hebrew word is called tzedakah. Tzedakah comes from another word which is called tzedek. Tzedek means you got to do the right thing. And because it says twice, that means you got to do the right thing all the time. And it means if you could afford to give charity, then you should do it, if you could afford. The other meaning is, do not take revenge on your fellow man. Do not try to get even. You have to forgive what happened yesterday. And once I thought about it, I said, Yedemeyer, you know what? I'm going to lend you the money, but I'm going to make it easy on you. Every month only send me $25. He was the happiest person on earth that he's not going to be evicted. For 3 months, the money came. The first month, it's not coming. I called him up. He said, I put it away for you, but one of my children got ill, had to give it for the doctor. So I couldn't say nothing. Time went on. All the time he had another story. Everyone was legitimate. So I said, you know what, Yedemeyer? I forgive you the loan. You don't have to send me any more because I see you need it more than I do. That's what you have to do because we all come from the same source. So if we could help each other, we should do it.
That's the story I was anxious for you to tell, because I absolutely love that story. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, in Auschwitz, the story about when you went to get some food after the lights had gone out? Can you share a little bit about that?
First, before I answer this question, I just remembered one story which is important. This was in the beginning. We were marching 3 and 3 to go to work. The man to my right said to me, if I survive, I'm never going to believe in God. I said, why? He said, 2 days ago I had a wife and a 10-year-old son. Now I'm with myself. How could God do this to me? The man to my left overheard this conversation. He said, I never believed in God. If I survive, I'm going to believe in God. So everybody has a different opinion about God. And because God was in the conversation, I dreamt that night about God. That I'm in a conversation with him in a room with no windows, and it looked like it's like out of space. And I couldn't get used to that kind of air. I felt like sneezing, but I'm not going to sneeze in front of God. But finally, God sneezed, and I didn't know what to say. It's a good thing I woke up. So what was your question?
My question, I don't know how I'll follow that. Okay. You have a story about going to steal
Yeah.
a potato.
When you're hungry and you're tired, and it happened to be raining that day, so you come home wet, you cannot take off your clothes and put on other clothes. There's no such a thing. So you had to wait till it dries on you, so you can't fall asleep. The camp is lit. After 9 o'clock, there was guard around the camp with a weapon. If you go out of your barrack after 9 o'clock, no question asked, he will shoot you. However, when the American planes come and they pass by the camp, all the lights go out. They should know there's a camp. So I had an idea. It's dark. The guards cannot see me. I'm going to run to the kitchen, get some food, and come back. Going to the kitchen is no problem. Coming back, if you don't make it back to your barrack, they shoot you. I'm almost home. I was so happy. All of a sudden, I get attacked by 3 prisoners. They decided, why should I go to the kitchen and they might not make it, they're going to take away the food from me. When it was over, not only I didn't have the food, one of my shoes was missing. I don't know whether they took it or I didn't have time to look for it because I wanted to make sure I got into the barrack before the light comes on. So now I'm going to go to work the next day. So I cut off a piece from my blanket, I wrapped it around my shoe, that's how I went to work. On the way home, the soldier saw I only have one shoe. He gave me a slip to go to the warehouse. When you go to the warehouse, it's like this. As younger as the soldier is, as meaner he is, because he grew up in a family like that. If he's a middleman, he feels sorry for you a little bit. So I gave him the slip. He doesn't even ask me what size. He picks up a parachute, gives it to me. I go home. They're one size too small. I come back. I said, excuse me. He happened to be only 19 years old, maybe 18 or maybe 20. So I know I'm going to have problems with him. I said, excuse me, could you give me one size bigger? He said, I cannot hear you, come closer. I said it again, he said, come closer. When I was face to face, he gave me such a slap, he said, go back to your barrack. It's the first time I actually saw like stars. So now I'm going to go to work tomorrow when, if it's going to snow and the sole was made out of wood, it sticks to the snow. So finally, I couldn't keep up with the group, and this happened to be a middle-aged soldier. He said to me, I'm going to give you 2 choices, and you take the choice. I cannot get behind because of you. Either I shoot you right here, or take off your shoes and walk barefooted. So I took off my shoes. Instead of walking, I was jumping, walking, my toes not to freeze. When I got to the destination, I was looking around for somebody much smaller than me. Maybe his shoes are too big. Luckily, I ran. 12 o'clock, I found somebody like that. Mine was good for him. His was good for me. And everybody was telling me, if you survive today, you're going to survive the camp.
I want to go back a little ways to the faith, keeping your faith at Auschwitz and what you were saying about the 2 people on either side of you. And tell us a little bit about Passover in the camp.
Yeah. Well, in every camp there is a rabbi or a man, it's called a dayan, which is more like a judge. They make sure they know every day that's coming, so when a holiday comes, they know when it's Saturday, they should try to observe them more than they can. So finally it came the night of Passover, which is the Seder, and I'm standing in line to get my food, coming home from work, and a man goes, looks around, couldn't figure out why he's looking around. Then he comes over to me. He said, there's a rabbi in a Barak 10. There's going to be a Seder tonight. Why don't you come there? I couldn't figure out why he chose me. When I got there, I found out, because I was the youngest one, I'm the one who's going to ask the questions. So I went home first to eat my dinner. This time I was lucky, it was 2 pieces of potato in the soup. And it was so delicious for me that I didn't want to finish the whole thing. I figured I'm going to enjoy myself twice, now and after the Seder. So now I have to look at a place where I'm sure nobody's going to find it. And I thought I found one. There's no way any could find it, and I put it there. So I go into the Seder, and they were waiting for me because I'm the one who's going to ask the question. And they told me to ask the 4 questions. While I was doing it, I said, how could I do this? I'm talking about liberation in the questions, and I'm a slave even worse than the Jews in Egypt. But when you are in such a position, you're looking, anything might help you. So I figured, I'm going to do it. Maybe this is going to help you to survive. But my mind was also on the food, what I left behind. So I couldn't wait to go home. Sure enough, when I get there, it was not there. And that night, there's no way I could tell you how I felt that I was looking forward to finish my dinner, and it was not there. Somebody must have smelled it somehow and took it away.
For those of you who aren't familiar with the Passover Seder, part of the Seder is the asking of 4 questions, and it is always done by the youngest person. So that's what Ernie was referring to when he was asked to be part of the Seder because he was the youngest.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so you had some family, you knew some people at Auschwitz, Joseph and Yidemeier, who is your cousin, and you managed to stay together in Auschwitz. But can you tell us how you lost each other as we bridge into your trip to Dachau?
We happened to be not only together, we were in the same group, going to work every day. So the soldier was watching people who cannot produce anymore to take them to Camp 7. So we were standing in line to go home. It was at night. Couldn't wait. We should leave already to go home to get the dinner. And this soldier, for some reason, picked me out of the line, picked up my cousin Yidemeier and Joseph, and told us to go to Camp 7. We're not going to go home. Now, we already knew what was going to happen. Once you're in Camp 7, they don't feed you anymore because you're not working anymore. The longest you're there is 3 days. After the 2nd days, they took us, we went back into the train. By that time, it was not standing room only, because nobody was able to stand. Everybody sat on the floor. So it was Yidemeier, my cousin Joseph, and myself. There was April 28, 1945. And all of a sudden, American planes came again. That means the train stops. Everybody has to get out and go into the woods. I was able to get up. Yidemeier was able to get up. Joseph couldn't. He asked me to help him because I was so weak, I couldn't do it by myself. I said, Yidemeier, you have to help me. I take one arm, you take the other one. He said, I'm very weak, I can't do that. So we dropped him, we left him there. When we came back, he was no longer there. When we were liberated, his brothers knew we were together, and they asked me, where is my brother Joseph? I wasn't ready to tell them the story. I was trying all the time to change the subject, and after 15 years, I told them what happened to Joseph. Now, I'm standing in line to get into the crematorium. I was so far away, I didn't see the building yet. So finally, I was close enough to see the building. Instead of being scared that another half an hour will be gone. I was actually happy because I was so tired and it happened to be drizzling. My clothes was wet. I wanted to get it over with. And all of a sudden, the soldier near me is throwing down his weapon and he's running away. And nobody's moving. We didn't know how to handle this. I turned around. There's an American Jeep with four soldiers, liberated us. I don't know what happened next. All I know, the next day I wound up in a sanatorium, which is like a convalescent home, to recuperate. So I was there. In the meantime, I did not know what happened to my two other brothers. We also had a room designated anybody who wants to go to services. So that day I went for services, and my older brothers, it was Abraham and David. Abraham survived, and he was a little bit healthy, and we were already in deeply displaced person camps, and he went from one camp to another to see whether he sees anybody from his family. When he came to this convalescent home, he saw Ernie Gross. He came in there, they told him I'm at services. The door opened, and no matter how you pray, you have to see who's coming in. And I saw him. This is the first time in my life I was happy and sad. Happy to see him. Sad if he came alone, that means the other one didn't survive. His name was David, and he was my favorite brother. I said, where is David? He said, I'll tell you later. So he told me later that he died of starvation.
Thank you. Would you be willing, well, I'm just going to say, we're going to open it up to questions. I'm not going to give you a choice unless you really don't want to answer questions. Within the camp in Auschwitz, because there were so many people there, did people ever talk about a revolt?
Nobody knew everybody. I didn't know anybody's name. Everybody was for themselves, because everybody was either hungry or tired or the clothes was wet. So we did not talk to each other, we just followed the rules. Once you were home, you were so tired, you just wanted to lay. We were like 32 prisoners in one side of the barrack. It was a long board, and the mattress was straw, and we were laying next to each other. On the other side, also 32 people, and we didn't talk to each other. We were busy with ourselves.
You were quite tired as well,
Yeah, right.
and fighting just to survive.
It was nothing unusual. When I woke up in the morning, my left neighbor or my right neighbor never woke up. It was nothing unusual because they died during the night of starvation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. As you continue to tell your story and the experience of what happened to you, why do you continue to tell it, and what do you hope to get from it?
Did you hear her?
No, yes.
Can you,
Somebody has to be there.
yeah, Sarah, yeah, she's right here.
Okay.
Sarah, can you talk louder into the mic, please?
What do you hope to get from continually telling your story to those of us?
Sarah's asking, why is it that you continually tell your story? What motivates you to do that?
I'm already here more than 70 years. I didn't know that my wife was a survivor. She didn't know that I was a survivor. In the house, survivor was never used. We were trying not to talk about it because it was too painful. And my wife died when she was 47 years old. She died of lung cancer. And one night I was laying in bed. I said to myself, I do not know anything about my wife. I don't know the name of her camp. I don't know what she went through. And she never asked me. So that gave me energy to start talking.
How long ago was that you started talking?
Even though I'm here more than 70 years, I'm only doing this for the last 10 years. I'm not done yet. I'm not finished. Not only am I talking, I made up my mind. No matter how tired I am, anybody who asks me to talk, I'm going to be there. It doesn't matter whether it's Catholic school or a church or a synagogue, I'm ready to go. But I never knew that somebody is going to call me from a nursing home. Her name was Dana. She said, I heard you talking, and I heard you also use humor in your talk. How would you like to, I'm in charge of, in a nursing home is called Glendale, and I'm in charge of the 4th floor. Would you like to come there and talk to them? So because I promised I'm never going to refuse, I said yes. I go there, and she said to me like this, by the way, I forgot to tell you, everybody who's in this floor either is beginning of dementia or the beginning of Alzheimer's. I want you to know so you know how to talk to them. I said, no problem. So I go in the dining room. Everybody was able. They no wheelchairs and no walkers because they only had this problem. And it was very successful. They were able to understand me and they were able to ask questions. And then the teacher came over to me. She said, you have to do me one more favor. Come back next Wednesday, because some of them had doctor appointment and some of them had physical therapy, and they anxious to hear you also. So I said, okay, I'm coming, but this time it's only going to be for 20 minutes. I was a little bit late. They were all waiting for me, and more people than a week before. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It looked like they know who I am. They remember me because the way they were smiling, they're reaching out to me. And I said, how is it possible they could remember me from last week? Maybe a miracle happened. But I had to know this, so I know how to talk to them. If they do remember me from last week, there's one way I do it. If they don't remember me, there's another way of doing it. So I figure I'm going to ask them, do you know who I am? Do you remember me from last week? I said, excuse me, do you know who I am? One lady got up, she said, go to the front desk. They will tell you who you are.
Oh. All right, so.
You're not done yet.
Any other questions?
Would it ever happen here? The Holocaust, could the Holocaust happen here?
You mean it could? Well, that's why I'm doing this. Especially I go to schools, because those are the ones who are growing up now. And I tell the students, when you go for lunch, you don't have to eat with your friends all the time. You see a student eating by himself, go over there, can I have my lunch with you? To include him, because it doesn't matter how we look like, it doesn't matter where we come from, we all come from the same source, so we have to get along. And I also tell them, if you say nothing, you get nothing. Nobody even knows who you are. If you say something, you never know where it's going to lead you. By me saying something, that's why I'm here tonight to talk to you. So, hoping whatever I tell, one place I went there, and when I started to talk, I told them I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a professor, I don't even know how to talk. And after it was over, the principal came over to me and he said, not only are you a good speaker, you're an educator. You're telling the students how to grow up and how to do their life. Well, that's my mission now. I'm already here on borrowed time. In 11 years, I'm going to be 100. So I might as well do what I have to do. Over there. Well, in Europe, they said, if you come to the United States, money grows on trees. So I didn't know that you have to work for it. so I was disappointed on that one.
Have you visited?
That actually was a good question. About 3 years ago, we got a phone call from Germany. They invited me to come back to help them celebrate 70 years of liberation of Dachau. And I told them that I don't travel anymore by myself, that my son, his name is Stephen, has to come with me to help him with the luggage and everything else. They said, no problem. And also I speak with Dan Greenbaum. He's the one who was one of the 4 soldiers who liberated me, so we speak together. And he was invited also. And
Can you tell how you found him?
yeah. Once I was established already in the United States, I was looking for any American soldier who liberated Dachau to thank him that he saved my life. I bought all kinds of papers. I could never find one. It took me 60 years till I bought the Jewish Exponent. There was an article that the wife put in that her husband liberated Dachau, and he also speaks in synagogues. I said, this is a person that I have to meet. And I found out his phone number, and I called him up, and he was so excited, he wanted to meet me the same day. That's how we met. And he came with his wife, and I came with one of my sons. We went into a restaurant, and we had it. He was telling his story, I was telling my story. From that time on, we speak together a lot of times.
Yes. What was your experience like right after you got out of the camp? How did you come to terms with it spiritually? To be able to eat and to just understand your freedom.
When I was in this sanatorium, they were very careful what to give me because the stomach was not used to all kind of food. So it took time till I was recuperated there. And I still did not know anything was going to happen to me. And because I was under 21, and anybody under 21 lost their parents, was able to come to the United States. I had 2 more brothers survived and a sister. One went to Belgium, and a brother and sister, they went to Israel. But we met every 5 years in Israel together. Now, they all passed away. I'm the only one who's still alive. So, and the reason I'm still here, because one time I spoke to a Mason group. Are you familiar with the Mason? And I was invited there over lunch. What I didn't know, that before lunch there is somebody does a prayer to God about eating the food. And in the prayer he said, thank you, God, for keeping Ernie Gross alive so he could tell us what happened many years ago. And maybe he came true, that's why I'm still here. Yeah.
Can you tell them how, or did you tell them about your the three aunts that you went?
Once I arrived to New York, they signed a social worker to you, and they told you, You name the city, and we're going to take you there, and you're going to make a life for yourself. I only knew Philadelphia because my father had 3 sisters who came over many, many years ago. So I figured I have 3 aunts in Philadelphia. Maybe I had the address. Maybe it's going to be good for me. So the social worker came with me to Philadelphia. She had the address. We went to the first one. Her name is Yedda. And she said, Yedda, this is your father's brother. His name is Ernie. He survived the camps. Do you think you could help him? And she said, how do I know who is Ernie? Maybe he's somebody else. He's only saying it. And she said, I cannot help him. So we went to the other aunt. Surprisingly, she said exactly the same thing, like they were conversing about this. When we got to the third aunt, she accepted me as their nephew, but she said, I have 4 daughters, and all these 3 bedrooms, there's really no room for him. So now, what are they going to do with me? So she found a home, that room and board, and the lady of the house spoke Yiddish, so I was able to talk to her, and I was staying there. And I went to school to learn English. And she gave me $1.50 spending money. So what did I do with $1.50 spending money? Because in New York, somebody bought me ice cream. It was so delicious. So I figured now I have money, I'm going to buy ice cream. So I go into this luncheonette. They said, can I help you? I said, ice cream. They said, what flavor? I had no idea what that meant. So she kept on naming flavors, and I just stopped her. And it didn't matter because I like all kind of ice cream. That was my first experience in the United States as a lady there.
We have time for just this one more. Yeah. After Auschwitz, what was your first meal after Auschwitz? Do you remember Do you remember what your first meal was after Auschwitz?
I do not remember the first meal, but I do remember I had to go to the bathroom every minute.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause?
Somehow I got extra energy.
A week ago, you didn't even know you were going to be in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, did you?
Right. I just want to tell you one more thing, because I'm not so sure I made 10 people laugh. I go to a senior citizen for lunch every day. And one time I passed by a table, and a lady called me over. She said, how would you like to come over for dinner at my house? So I want to have an idea what she's cooking. I said, what are my choices? And she said, yes or no.
We'll just stay there.
We're done, right?
Though fighting still raged in the Pacific Theater, World War II in Europe officially ended with Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945. Allied armed forces advanced across Europe in the war's final stages, relentlessly pursuing the retreating German army. As they did, they stumbled onto camps, often accidentally, that had been established and run by the Nazis and their local collaborators. The Soviet army, advancing from the east, liberated Nazi camps in Poland, including Majdanek and Auschwitz. The British and Canadians, advancing from the west, liberated Bergen-Belsen and camps in northern Germany. The Americans, our focus here, liberated Dachau, Buchenwald, and other camps.
As their armies advanced across Europe, the Allies found thousands of people imprisoned in camps. They encountered piles of corpses and thousands of skeletal prisoners on the verge of death from malnutrition and disease.
This was their first encounter with the horror of what would come to be known as the Holocaust.
They began to understand that the Nazis had committed atrocities against civilians,
The vast majority of them Jews,
on an unimaginable scale, and that these atrocities were very different from the deaths caused by conventional warfare. A new category of crime had to be recognized to describe the intentional attempt to destroy a people. This crime came to be known as genocide.
the soldiers were the very first outside witnesses of the Holocaust, an unprecedented case of genocide.
The testimonies of the first soldiers who entered the camps, known as the liberators, are important eyewitness accounts of the mass atrocities committed against the Jews of Europe by the Nazis and their collaborators. Hardened combat veterans, the American GIs were used to death. Many had been fighting for years, but they had never seen killings of civilians on the massive scale they discovered. Their first encounters with Holocaust survivors at this unique moment in time give us an essential and intensely human perspective on the difference between military war and genocide.
Leon Bass was 20 years old and was among the first U.S. soldiers to arrive at Buchenwald.
I can never forget that day, because when I walked through that gate, I saw in front of me what I call the walking dead. I saw human beings that had been beaten, had been starved, had been tortured. They'd been denied everything. They had skeletal faces with deep-set eyes. Their heads had been clean-shaved, and they were standing there, and they were holding on to one another just to keep from falling. I saw the clothing of little children, the little children that didn't survive. Up against the wall, there were mounds of clothing. I saw the caps, sweaters, the stockings, the shoes, but I never saw a child.
Harry Mogen was a Jewish refugee from Nazi persecution. He reached the United States and became a soldier and a liberator.
And you saw women on the floor, on wooden pallets. When I say women, you saw skeletons. Rags hanging on them, no shoes. Bones instead of faces, and the stench was so horrible. It's hard to describe.
What the American soldiers found at Ohrdruf, a subcamp of Buchenwald, was so grisly that General Dwight D. Eisenhower, then the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in Europe, together with Generals Patton and Bradley, arrived to inspect the camp for themselves. After his visit, Eisenhower cabled.
The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were so overpowering as to leave me a bit sick. I made the visit deliberately in order to be in a position to give firsthand evidence of these things if ever, in the future, there develops a tendency to charge these allegations merely to propaganda.
These words are now engraved on the wall of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C.
We are fortunate to have with us here tonight some of our nation's finest, individuals who served in World War II, to whom we are all deeply grateful for their service and sacrifice for our freedoms. As we heard, Ernie Gross was himself liberated by American forces in 1945, and we would like to recognize Sergeant Wilbur Hague and Corporal Orrin Lee to come to the stage and share a few remarks. In appreciation of our special veterans that we have here this evening, we have 2 flags that were flown over the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and we're going to give them now to Corporal Orrin Lee and Sergeant Wilbur Hague. Yeah, these were flown over the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and they come with a certificate certifying that. So, and we'd also like to recognize World War II veteran Dwayne Miller, who is here this evening as well, who served from 1943 through 1945 and fought in Germany, as well as other countries in Europe as well. Please give a hand to Dwayne Miller. Wow. Please join me in thanking our presenters this evening, Ernie Gross, Wilbur Hague, and Orrin Lee, who shared their important memories, and Sue Sidoti and Sarah Richter for such an inspiring musical performance. We're incredibly grateful to Sarah Crosby, who moderated this evening, for our assistance from the very beginning of planning of this event, and to our good friends Ann and Joe Henkin and Arnie and Lynn Garson. This evening would not have been possible without the advice, support, and friendship of each of you. Once again, we would like to thank our co-hosts, Augustana University and Mark Blackburn, for this evening and this evening's major sponsors. You may know of Helmsley's efforts to improve access and services for rural healthcare in South Dakota and across the upper Midwest, but they're also very involved with similar projects in Israel. Over the past decade, the Helmsley Trust has committed over $250 million to fund hospitals, clinics, and research in Israel. Please join me in thanking one of Helmsley's trustees who is here with us this evening, Mr. Walter Penzier. Thank you. And Sanford Health, who since our arrival in Sioux Falls have welcomed us with open arms, especially the president of Sanford Sioux Falls, Mr. Paul Hansen, who is here with us this evening. Thank you. We would like to thank the JCRC under the leadership of Steve Hunnigs and Laura Zell, who assisted us with the preparation for this evening's programs and the books that you will each receive as you exit the hall. The Anti-Defamation League and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, who assisted us with the displays and posters, Curtis and Julie Friesen for the video production, Mitch Krebs, Elizabeth Rowan, Annika Preston, and Chris, who assisted us in the lead up to this event, Jennifer Miners, Maddie Todd for the technical arrangements, Secretary Larry Zimmerman, Shirley Redmond of the VA for all their assistance. We have a special gift for everybody here this evening, a book of testimonies by Midwestern Holocaust survivors. Please be sure to take one home with you as you leave. Thank you all and good night.